I was 17 when I made my bones. That's how they say it. Made your bones like it's some ritual with fire and steel. Truth is, it's just blood. Blood and silence. And if you survive it, they never look at you the same way again. The city was different, then dirty, alive, humming with fear. We owned the night in Bensonhurst, in Bay Ridge, in parts of Staten Island where the cops didn't bother to go unless someone white and rich turned up dead. We weren't drug dealers, at least not openly. We weren't street thugs. We were businessmen, soldiers, cleaners, messengers. I was one of the youngest earners under Paulie D'Annunzio, captain in the Gambino family, and a man who once buried 3 bodies in the same foundation of a Little Italy wine bar. Paulie picked me because I didn't blink. I never flinched. And maybe because my Uncle Frankie vouched for me with his life. Uncle Frankie was old school. He did 15 years for a hit he didn't commit, just to keep his mouth shut. That's the kind of man you owe everything to. The job that made me came in cold on a Wednesday. I was eating an eggplant parm sandwich at Sal's Deli, wiping oil from my fingers with a napkin that had someone else's blood on it. Nobody asked whose. Paulie walked in like a ghost, his grey trench coat flapping around him like he'd just stepped out of a storm. Even though the sky outside was clear. Vin, he said. That's what he called me. Never Vincent. Never Vinny, just Vin. We got a problem on 75th and Bay. I nodded, didn't ask questions. If Paulie said there was a problem, it wasn't the kind you called 911 about. It was the kind you solved with a .38 special and 2 hours of plausible deniability. The guy's name was Tony Eggs Farella. He used to run numbers for us, but lately he'd been seen talking to a guy from the Colombo family, and that was bad news. Very bad. Crossing families without permission was like sleeping with your boss's wife, even if you didn't mean to. Even if nothing happened, the suspicion alone was enough to get you buried in a landfill with your shoes sticking out. Take care of it, Paulie said, handing me a small keychain, a car key, nothing more. I found the Cara 1981 black Buick Regal parked 2 blocks away with a duffel bag in the trunk. Inside, gloves, a gun, duct tape, a roll of trash bags. No words, no instructions, just a toolkit for a one-way conversation. Tony lived in a ratty apartment above a pizza joint, and he liked to drink cheap whiskey alone with the blinds shut. I waited until nightfall, knocked once, then again. It's open, he shouted. I slipped inside, shut the door, locked it behind me. Vin, he blinked. What are you doing here, kid? I shot him twice before he finished his sentence. 1 in the chest, 1 in the head. Clean, quiet. He dropped like a marionette with its strings cut. Then came the hard part wrapping the body, dragging it down the stairs at 2 in the morning, avoiding drunks, lights, dogs. I dumped him in the trunk, drove to a scrapyard in Jersey where the night guy owed us a few favors. I paid him with silence and left before sunrise. That night, I didn't sleep, but I didn't feel anything either. No remorse, no guilt. Just this eerie calm, like I had finally become what everyone around me already believed I was. The next day, Paulie handed me a manila envelope with $5,000 in cash and a nod. That nod meant everything. I was in. Over the next year, I climbed the ladder fast too fast. I was earning, collecting, enforcing. I broke a man's fingers for skipping payments, shoved another guy's head through his own jukebox. I helped torch a rival bookie's bar while his mistress screamed from the upstairs bedroom, and I never asked why. There's a hierarchy to the life that the top is the boss, then the underboss, then the capos like Paulie, then soldiers like me. Beneath us were associates wannabes, hangers-on, guys who wanted in but hadn't proven themselves. Blood wasn't a requirement, but loyalty was. Loyalty above all. But loyalty is a funny thing in this life. It's expected, not given. It's tested constantly, like an old bridge holding too much weight, and sooner or later, it cracks. In '85, Paul Castellano, our boss, was shot dead outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan. That changed everything. John Gotti, a flashy, charming psychopath with a smile made of steel, took over. He wore $2,000 suits and tipped cabbies with hundreds. People called him the Dapper Don. But under the silk ties and Rolex watches, Gotti was a killer. Worse, he was a killer with something to prove. Gotti didn't like Paulie. Said he was too quiet, too old school. That's when the whispers started, that Paulie might get shelved or clipped. I remember one night at the Ravenite Social Club, Gotti looked right through Paulie, then glanced at me. "You his boy?" he asked. I nodded. "Loyalty's good," he said. "But sometimes, the smart move is knowing when to stop being loyal." That was the first time I felt it real fear. Not fear of death. Fear of being forced to choose between two devils. Paulie, who made me, and Gotti, who could erase me like a chalk mark on a sidewalk. Things escalated fast. Paulie started making moves, quiet ones, shifting money, pulling back soldiers, and one day he told me to dig a hole out in Long Island, just in case, he said. A hole big enough for 2 men, and maybe one more. The hole was 6 feet deep, 3 feet wide, and smelled like pine needles and wet rot. I dug it myself, sweating through my undershirt in the October chill, the shovel thudding into the earth like a drumbeat marking time. Paulie stood a few feet away, smoking in silence, the wind rustling his trench coat like dead leaves. "You always dig your own graves in this life," he said finally, "even when you're the one holding the gun." I didn't ask who the hole was for. I already knew it was insurance for him, for me, for whatever came crawling out of the shadows Gardy was casting across the family. Something was shifting. Everyone felt it. Guys who used to laugh too loud at the club suddenly went quiet when Gotti walked in. Soldiers started switching allegiances like rats switching lifeboats. The Ravenite became a stage, and we were all actors playing the wrong parts. A week after the digging, word came down. Paulie was summoned to a sit-down with Angelo Ruggiero, Gotti's right hand. These sit-downs were like coin flips. Half of them ended in handshakes, the other half in body bags. "Bring Ven Paulie," told the messenger. I could feel it in my gut this wasn't a peace talk. It was a setup, but I couldn't say no. Not to Paulie. Not to the man who brought me in, who taught me the rules, who once told me, "You can't outrun your shadow, kid. Might as well learn to live with it." The meeting was in the back room of a bakery in Queens. We walked in through the alley, past stacked crates and the smell of fresh bread. Inside, Angelo was already seated, chewing a toothpick, 2 goons behind him with folded arms and cold eyes. "Paulie," Angelo said, "glad you came. You didn't give me much of a choice." Angelo smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We've got concerns. Word is, you've been shuffling envelopes that should be going to the top, hiding money, playing both sides." Paulie didn't flinch. "That's a lie." "I hope so," Angelo said, standing slowly. "Because if it ain't, you're gonna have to answer to the big man." "I don't answer to him," Paulie said calmly. "I answer to the code." The room fell dead silent. In this world, there's a line you don't cross. And Paulie just pissed all over it. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe instinct, maybe fear, maybe loyalty. But when one of Angelo's men reached into his jacket, I moved. Fast. I had my piece drawn before he did. Pointed it at his temple. "Put it down," I said. He froze. "Put it down." Angelo's eyes narrowed. "You really want to do this, kid?" I glanced at Paulie. His hand was in his coat, 2 fingers on steel. He gave me a look, not panic, not fear, just one of those "this is it" looks. "I didn't steal," Paulie said, "but I ain't gonna die without saying my piece. You boys forget what this life is built on. And you forgot who the boss is now," Angelo snapped. No one moved. For 30 seconds, the room was a war waiting for a spark. Then Angelo raised his hands. "Fine, you get a pass." This time he motioned to his guys, who stepped back, slowly. Paulie turned, walked out. I followed. My hands were still shaking. That night, we didn't talk much. Just drove back in silence. "Thanks," Paulie muttered, barely audible. But I knew it wasn't over. Gotti didn't forgive. He waited. He watched. And when the time was right, he struck like a cobra. 2 days later, Paulie disappeared. No body, no call, just gone. And everyone knew what it meant. I waited for word, a call, a message, some hint that maybe he'd gone into hiding, or maybe he'd skipped town. But nothing came. The street got colder without him, more dangerous. I stopped going to the Ravenite. Too many eyes, too many whispers. Instead, I ran collections solo, kept my mouth shut, and listened. That's how you survive in this life, not by talking, but by listening. And what I heard chilled me. They were saying I helped set Paulie up, that I pulled the trigger, that I'd been flipped. It didn't matter that it wasn't true. Perception is truth in this world. One night, a guy named Nicky Gallo cornered me in the alley behind a pool hall in Flatbush. "Hey Vin," he said, smiling too wide. "Heard you've been macking moves. Garty's golden boy now, huh?" I didn't respond. "Must be nice," he said, stepping closer. No questions, no heat. "You must have done something real special." I saw the blade before he even moved. Reflex took over. I grabbed his wrist, slammed it into the brick wall, heard bones crack. Then I drove my elbow into his throat, took his knife, and buried it in his gut. Twice, he dropped, gasping. "You come at me again," I whispered. "You better finish the job." I walked away, blood soaking into my sleeves. The next day, another envelope showed up at my door. No note, just money. Message received. They weren't punishing me. They were testing me, and I had passed. But I wasn't loyal to Garty. I wasn't loyal to the New Order. I was loyal to Paulie's ghost, to the rules he lived by, and I wanted answers. I started poking around, quietly asking questions, following whispers. What I found wasn't just betrayal, it was rot. Deep, systemic rot. Gotti wasn't just changing the rules. He was burning the rulebook, paying off cops, bribing judges, running dope through back channels he'd once sworn to keep clean. And somewhere in that rot, I found a name, Benny Romano. A soldier close to Garty, a guy who owed Paulie big time. The same guy who picked up Paulie the night he disappeared. I waited 3 weeks before I made my move. Followed Benny to a strip club in the Bronx. Waited till he was drunk, sloppy. Then I dragged him into the alley behind the club. Put a gun to his kidney. "Where's Paulie?" I whispered. He laughed, spat blood. "He's gone, kid. Should have been you too." I broke his jaw. Then I broke his ribs. And finally, when he begged, I stopped. "He's buried under the bridge," he gasped. "The one on 112th. They poured concrete over him. I left him there, bleeding. Then I drove. I stood on that bridge at dawn, watching the traffic move like ants beneath me. Paulie was down there, in the dark. Forgotten, but I remembered. And I was going to make them remember, too. The bridge on 112th was the kind of place no one stopped to look at. People drove over it every day, rushing to work, to school, to whatever part of life didn't involve bodies beneath concrete. But I stood there for hours. No one noticed me. No one ever notices the quiet ones. They don't see the ghosts we carry. I stared down at the water, at the stretch of foundation Benny had described, fresh cement, grey against the aged stone. He was down there, poorly, encased in a slab like a relic nobody wanted to find. And now I had names, faces, people who'd been part of it. Ghati's new regime had done the job, no question. But it wasn't just about orders anymore. It was about fear, obedience, loyalty enforced at gunpoint. This wasn't the old code. This was a dictatorship with a Rolex and a smile. I made a list that night, not on paper only, in my head. Writing anything down in this life was asking to be found out. But I memorized it. Who knew what? Who was there that night? Who looked the other way? Benny Romano was first, but not the last. Next was Frankie Todaro, another soldier turned enforcer for the new boss. I knew he ran a loan shark racket out of an auto shop on Avenue X. I waited for him in the parking lot across the street, engine off, eyes on the front door. He came out just after 11 p.m., lighting a cigarette, leather jacket creaking as he moved. I walked up slow. "Frankie," I said. He looked up, didn't even reach for his gun. That was his mistake. "What?" I cracked him across the jaw with the butt of my pistol. He hit the pavement like a dropped sack of bricks. I dragged him into the back of his own car, tied his hands with his shoelaces, shoved a rag in his mouth. We drove to an abandoned pier in Red Hook. The place smelled like salt and rust, and the only sounds were waves and rats. I pulled him from the car, threw him against a piling. "You were there," I said. He shook his head, tried to deny it. I pressed the barrel of the gun into his gut. "You held him down while they did it." His eyes widened. That told me everything. I didn't kill him. I let him talk. Everything. How they took Paulie out to the bridge. How they shot him twice in the head and dumped him like garbage. Ghati hadn't even bothered to show up. He sent men. That was his style. Clean, distant. Frankie begged me to let him go. Said he didn't have a choice. I did. I pulled the trigger once. Then again. Then I rolled his body into the water. I didn't feel satisfaction. Just momentum. Like a wheel that couldn't stop turning. Each name on the list brought me closer to the truth. But it also made me a target. A few days later, someone shot at me while I was leaving a diner in Bensonhurst. I ducked, rolled, came up firing. I didn't hit anyone, but the message was clear. They knew I had no allies left, no crew, no family. Uncle Frankie was long gone, died inside a cell upstate, his heart stopping sometime between lights out and morning call. They said it was natural. I didn't believe it. Not anymore. The only person I trusted was Maria. She wasn't part of the life. She was a waitress at a coffee shop I used to stop at before runs. We talked, sometimes, nothing serious. But when you live the kind of life I did, even casual kindness feels like salvation. I showed up at her place one night, bleeding from the shoulder, a bullet grazed that tore through my jacket and part of my flesh. She didn't ask questions. She just cleaned the wound, bandaged me up, and poured 2 glasses of bourbon. "You gonna tell me what this is?" she asked finally. I shook my head. She looked at me a long time. You're not a good man, are you? No, I said. But I'm not the worst one either. She didn't press. That was the moment I knew she'd either save me or be the last good thing I ever touched before everything fell apart. Over the next few weeks, I worked from the shadows. No phones, no cars, cash only. I lived like a ghost, moving at night, sleeping in cheap motels, listening to the city hum like a warning. They were looking for me now, Garty's crew. They'd put a bounty out, I was sure. I wasn't just a liability, I was a reminder of a code they'd erased, of a loyalty they couldn't buy. One night, I got a tip from a friend on the Dockson, old guy named Sal who used to run guns during the Cuban boat lifts. He said he heard something big. Guy named Luca Bellini, one of Garty's new captains. He talks too much when he drinks, bragging about how they clipped a captain in the old days. Said it was the boss's idea. Said they buried him under a bridge. Luca, another name, another target. I tracked him for 3 days. He stayed in a condo in Brooklyn Heights, top floor, with a view of the water and a security system worth more than the car I used to drive. But he had one weakness. He liked the clubs. Thursday nights, he always showed up at La Scala, some overpriced VIP lounge with velvet ropes and valet parking. I waited until he stumbled out, buzzed and laughing, his arm around a girl half his age. I followed them to a hotel, and I waited, until the girl left. Then I went in. I picked the lock. Quiet, clean. He was in the bathroom when I stepped in, singing to himself. When he came out, I was already sitting on the bed. Hello, Luca. He froze. You're dead, he whispered. Not yet. He reached for something. I shot him in the leg. He screamed. Collapsed. Talk, I said. Who ordered it? He spat blood. You already know. Say it. He hesitated. Then, John, I nodded. That was all I needed. I left him there, bleeding. Called 911 from a payphone. Let the cops clean it up. Luca wasn't worth a bullet to the head. Not anymore. I had one name left. Only one. The last name on my list was the one that changed everything. John Gotti. They called him the Dapper Don, the Teflon Don. Smiled in court, laughed at cameras, walked out of every trial without a scratch. But behind that charm was something darker, an executioner in a $1,000 suit. I couldn't just walk up to him. He was surrounded by bodyguards, drivers, cleaners. Every move he made was shadowed. If I was going to get to him, I needed to disappear, completely stop being Vin. I had to become something else. So I buried the past, burned every piece of identification I had, cut ties with everyone except Maria. Even she didn't know where I was staying. I became a ghost in my own city. I studied his habits, his patterns, where he ate, when he left the Ravenite, who was with him and who wasn't. It took 3 months, but eventually I found the crack. Every Wednesday, just after 1 a.m., he left the Ravenite social club alone. No guards, no driver, just a black Cadillac and a cigar burning between his fingers. It was his routine, his little moment of solitude. I knew that was when he felt untouchable. I made my move on a Wednesday, but not that one. The week before, I broke into a locksmith's van in Queens, stole a set of master keys. Then I scoped out a rooftop across from the Ravenite, 10 floors up, clear view of the curb, perfect sightline. I bought a Remington 700 off a guy I knew in the Bronx. Clean serial, long-range scope, took it apart, stashed it in 3 different bags, rode the subway with it like it was groceries. No one looked twice. That night, I climbed to the roof and waited. Midnight, 12:30, 12:50, 1 o'clock, there he was. John Gotti stepped out of the club, alone, smoke trailing behind him like a spectre. I exhaled, put my finger on the trigger, breathed in, but I didn't shoot. Something inside me said, not yet. I didn't want a bullet from 10 stories up. I wanted his eyes on me when he went down. I wanted him to know, so I pulled back. I left the rifle. I vanished. The next day, news broke of a gangland killing. Luca Bellini's body had washed up on a Jersey shore. The feds were sniffing around. Gotti was angry. I could feel it in the streets, like electricity before a storm. He was circling the wagons, tightening his grip. Everyone was scared, paranoid, and I was right where I wanted him. That same week, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. No one had this number. I picked up, silent. A voice on the line rasped, "You're making a lot of noise, kid." I didn't answer. "You want to take a swing at the king? You better not miss." Click. They knew, but they didn't know when. That was enough. I needed leverage, something to tip the balance. That's when I remembered Agent Moretti. He was a Fed who once tried to flip Paulie, failed, but I knew he hated Gotti more than any of us. I found him living like a ghost in jerseys, suspended, drunk, bitter, but still breathing. When I knocked on his motel door, he didn't even reach for his gun. "Took you long enough," he muttered. "You want him?" I said. He poured a drink. "I've wanted him for 20 years. "Then help me." He stared at me. "You serious?" "I want him dead," I said. "You want him in cuffs. Either way, we burn him down together." He laughed. "You really are your uncle's blood." We made a plan. I fed him intel drop locations, front businesses, routes. He passed it to his old contacts. Slowly, the screws began to tighten. A shipment got seized. A stash house raided. Money started disappearing. People started getting nervous. Gotti didn't go to war. He went silent. That was more dangerous. One night, Maria showed up at my door, shaking. "They came to the diner," she whispered. "They asked about you." My blood went cold. I moved her that night, out of the city, gave her cash, a burner phone, and told her to run. She cried, begged me to come with her, but I couldn't. "Someone's got to finish this," I said. For Paulie, she kissed me, once, then she left. The next night, the Ravenite went dark, closed, empty. They knew I was coming, and they were waiting. So I went anyway. Walked through Little Italy like I owned the place, like I had a right to be there. I pushed open the door to the club. There were 5 of them inside, all armed, and in the middle, sitting like a king on a ruined throne, John Gotti. "Look what crawled out of the past," he said. I stepped forward. No gun, no armor, just fury. "You killed my family." He smiled. "They were part of the game. This isn't a game anymore." He stood slowly. "You got balls, kid. I'll give you that." I didn't wait. I lunged. The room exploded. Gunshots, screams, blood. I don't remember most of it, just flashes. Me slamming a chair into someone's skull, a blade slicing across my ribs, my hands closing around Gotti's throat. He gasped, choked, eyes wide. "Say his name," I hissed. "Paulie," he whispered. I squeezed harder, and then a gunshot, pain, darkness. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed, handcuffed. Moretti sat beside me. "You killed 2 of them," he said. "Wounded Gotti, cops got there before you finished the job." I tried to sit up. "You're not dead," he said, "but you're not free either." I laughed, a dry, broken sound. "Was it worth it?" he asked. I stared at the ceiling, and I whispered, "Yes." They sent me to Rikers first. The place smelled like sweat and steel and something rotten buried deep in the walls. Guards eyed me like I was already in a coffin. Inmates whispered my name like I was a ghost come to finish unfinished business. "You're the guy who tried to choke out Gati," one of them said. I didn't answer. They already knew. Word spreads faster in prison than it ever did on the streets. And the Gambinos still had eyes and knives inside these walls. My second night in the intake block, a guy tried to shiv me in the showers. He came at me from behind, quiet, like a shadow with breath. But I'd lived too long in the dark. I caught his wrist, twisted it until I heard bone crack, took the blade and jammed it into his thigh. He went down screaming. Guards pulled me off him, tossed me into solitary. No trial, no warning, just concrete darkness and the sound of rats scratching through the vents. I stayed there for 17 days. No light, no books, no voice but my own. But I didn't go mad. I planned, because Gati was still breathing. He was in MDC Brooklyn now, waiting on federal charges. They'd finally managed to wrap him up in a RICO case thanks, in part, to the chaos I helped create. But prison wasn't punishment for men like him. It was strategy. He still had soldiers, still had money, still had influence. And most dangerous of all, he still had loyalty. By the time they transferred me to MDC, I was thinner, angrier, sharper. I walked in like a man with nothing left to lose, and I was right. They put me in a pod with guys who all had ties, Italian names, dead eyes. One of them, Ralph, Ciccio Mancaso, used to run a numbers game for Gotti's crew. He sized me up from across the cafeteria on day one. "You got a lot of people nervous, kid," he said. "Good," I replied. He grinned. "Means you're either dead soon or about to be offered a job." I ignored him, but I didn't ignore the message. Gotti wasn't done. Not with the outside world. Not with me. One night, I got a visit. Unexpected, unscheduled. It was his lawyer, but the message didn't come from any briefcase. He slid a note across the table. 7 words. "This ends when you end. Your call." I tore the paper in half, said nothing. That same night, my cellmate, some lifer named Rico, turned up dead. "Pills," they said. "Suicide." I didn't believe it for a second. They were tightening the noose again, quietly, from the inside out. So I made a choice. I flipped. Not on the family, not on Paulie, not on my code, but I gave Moretti everything he needed to make sure Gotti never saw daylight again. I gave him the names of shell companies, the safe houses, the fake IDs, the routes, the bank codes, everything Paulie had ever whispered in trust. I used to tear the empire down from inside its own heart. Some might call it betrayal. I called it justice. In exchange, I got moved. Protective custody, a new cell block, new guards, but no peace. Because Gati's influence didn't stop at concrete walls. He still had men in uniform, men with keys, men who hated me more than the feds ever could. One of them, Officer Cardenas, started playing games. Late meals, late meds. Doors left open just long enough for someone to slip in with a blade. I knew what he was doing, and I knew how to stop it. So I waited until lights out, made a shank from a toothbrush, a piece of wire, and a battery spring. When he came into the cell at 2:14 a.m., flashlight in hand, I was already behind the door. He didn't get a sound out before I had the blade to his throat. "Tell him," I whispered, "I'm not afraid to die." Then I pressed the edge against his skin until I saw blood. Let him go. He never came back. But the message was delivered. 2 days later, Gati was moved to solitary. No visitors, no phone. The feds were closing in. And I was winning. For the first time, I felt the tide shift. But then, Maria showed up. Behind glass, pale, shaking, hair pulled back, like she hadn't slept in days. "What are you doing?" she said. "You're becoming them." I stared at her. "I'm surviving." "No," she whispered. "You're decaying." She slid a photo across the tray. It was Paulie, smiling, in a suit, holding me on his shoulders when I was 5. "I came to tell you," she said. "He wouldn't want this." I looked down at the photo, and I broke. For the first time in years, I felt tears. Not for Paulie, but for what I'd become. After that visit, something inside me shifted. I didn't stop fighting, but I stopped killing. I gave Moretti one last list. Then I told him, "I'm done." He nodded. "They'll come for you," he said. "Even if you walk free, I know." And I was ready. Because the only way to kill a legacy like Gati's is to bury every piece of it. Starting with myself, they gave me a new name, new ID, new birthday, new everything. The feds called it a reward. Witness protection. I called it a coffin with sunlight. They dropped me in a nameless town in the southwest, where the heat bled into your bones and the silence was louder than sirens. I had a job washing dishes at a bar that didn't ask questions, and a one-bedroom apartment that smelled like dust and regret. It was supposed to be a new beginning, but you don't bury ghosts with paperwork. At night, I dreamed of blood, Paulie's hands, Gotti's eyes, Maria's voice. I woke up to silence so thick I could taste it. Some days I sat in the diner for hours, just staring out the window, watching tumbleweeds roll by and wondering when the bullet would come. Because I knew it would. The Gambinos don't forgive, they wait. 2 months in, I found a mark on my door, chalk, a cross. To anyone else, meaningless. To me, a death sentence. I packed a bag, slept with a pistol under my pillow. Didn't leave the apartment for 3 days. When I finally stepped outside, I saw a man at the gas station across the road, shaved head, suit too sharp for this town, hands in his pockets, just watching. I walked toward him. He smiled, didn't blink. "Nice weather," he said. I didn't answer. He leaned close, whispered, "You can run from the feds, but not from us." Then he walked away. I didn't sleep that night. I called Moretti. "They found me," he sighed. "We can move you." "No," I said. "No more hiding." I made a decision. I burned everything, the IDs, the passports, the files, the lies. I drove out of town that night, heading east. No GPS, no map. Just instinct and fear riding shotgun. By the time I stopped, I was in New Jersey, back where it started. I knew what I was doing was suicide. But sometimes suicide is the only thing that feels honest. I found Maria working at a shelter. She didn't scream when she saw me. Didn't cry either. Just looked at me like I was a ghost. "I thought you were dead," she said. "I'm trying to be." She let me sleep on the couch that night, said nothing more. But when I woke up, there was coffee on the table. 2 cups. That was her way of forgiving me. Sort of. I told her I wasn't staying long. "Tie up some loose ends," I said. She didn't ask questions. She never had to. because she knew what I meant. I wasn't here to live. I was here to end it. I started with Ralph Mancuso. He was out now, living in Staten Island under a fake name, still moving money through his cousin's dry cleaning business. I waited outside his shop for 6 hours before he finally came out. He didn't even recognize me until I said his name. Ralph. He turned, went pale. "No way, you're Rye." Grabbed him by the collar, slammed him against the wall. "You put the hit on Maria, didn't you?" "I didn't, I swear." I pressed a gun into his ribs. He shook like a leaf. "Please," he whimpered. "I was just following orders." I leaned close. "Tell your friends," I said. "I'm not gone, I'm not afraid, and I'm not done." Then I walked away, left him pissing himself in an alley. One by one, I hunted the last of them. Not to kill, but to warn. The message was simple. If you come for me, if you come for Maria, I will erase everything you ever built. And the word spread, the ghost is back. But here's the truth. There's no winning in this life. Just longer pauses between the pain. I tried to leave, to disappear again, but Maria stopped me. "I'm tired of running," she said. "Stay, build something." I laughed. "Like what? A life?" "Yes," she said. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of blood. But in the morning, there was a knock at the door. I opened it, and standing there in a grey suit was Agent Moretti. His face said everything. "They killed a judge last night," he said. "Gotti's appeal just got real messy." I nodded. "What does that have to do with me?" He hesitated. "They think it was you." I laughed bitterly. "Let them," but I saw the fear in his eyes. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. It was bait. Someone was framing me, dragging me back in. I looked at Maria. She looked at me ... and I knew. It wasn't over. I didn't kill the judge. Didn't even know her name until it hit the news. Marcia DeWitt. Federal, clean, no ties to the mob. But her skull was blown open in her own driveway, and someone made sure the shell casings were wiped clean. Left behind a note in her mailbox. "Tell Moretti he chose the wrong side." The handwriting looked familiar. Too familiar. It looked like mine. So now I wasn't just a former enforcer, or an informant, or a ghost. I was a suspect in the murder of a federal judge. Moretti's face, when he handed me the arrest warrant, said everything. "You need to come in," he said. I stared at him. "If I go in, I die. You know that I can protect you." I laughed. "You couldn't even protect her that got him quiet." He looked tired, older, like the years of chasing men like Gotti had finally cracked something behind his eyes. Then he said it. "They're framing you." Of course they were. But the twist in his voice told me more. He looked away. Not just the Gambino. And there it was. Someone in the bureau wanted me dead, too. A double setup. One bullet to silence a loose end. Blame it on the other side. Keep the machine clean. I didn't wait for the cuffs. I ran. Maria didn't ask questions. We had a bag packed in 6 minutes. Cash, burner phone, 2 guns. The moment we hit the highway, I knew it was already too late. A black SUV tailed us for 30 miles. I lost them near an abandoned overpass in Camden, ditched the car, took to the alleys. Maria followed without hesitation. She was all in now. I should have left her behind, but I didn't have anything left to live for without her. We ended up in a roach-infested motel off Route 131 room. No lights, just silence and sweat. I cleaned the gun, checked the windows. She sat on the bed, knees pulled to her chest. "They're not going to stop, are they?" "No," I said. "They're not." She nodded. Then she said something that broke me. "Then let's make them bleed." The next morning, I called a ghost. Vinny, the knife, Cardinelli, ex-Gambino, ex-Giller, current fugitive hiding in a junkyard in Newark. He owed me a favor. 12 years ago, I let him live when Paulie wanted his head on a spike. He never forgot. Now I needed his help. He showed up with a bag of guns, a burner laptop, and the kind of paranoia that came from burying too many bodies. "They want you quiet," he said. "You need noise." I nodded. Dot together, we started digging. Phone records, wire transfers, hotel security footage, and we found it. A man in a suit leaving Judge DeWitt's neighborhood 2 hours before the murder. Clean-shaven, confident, face blurred until Vinny cracked the image filters. Agent Brent Carraway, FBI, Internal Affairs, worked directly under Moretti for years. I remembered him, always smiling, always quiet. He was the inside man, the one who knew where I was, who fed the Gambinos the location, who planted the note, who wanted me dead and discredited. And the worst part, Moretti didn't know. I called him, told him to meet me at the pier in Hoboken, midnight. He showed, alone, looked like hell. "Why here?" he asked. I tossed him the photos. Carraway, the SUV, the fake note. His face drained of color. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. I trusted him. "You trust the wrong people," I said. "But it's not too late." He looked up. "What do you want?" "I want a meeting with the Attorney General. Full immunity. I give you everything. Carraway, the Gambinos, the whole goddamn network." He nodded slowly. "I'll make it happen." And for a moment, I believed him, until I saw the red dot on his chest. Sniper, one shot, clean through his heart. Moretti dropped like a stone. I dove behind the railing, pulled Maria down with me. Glass shattered, screams, panic, then silence. They were cleaning house, and I was next. I didn't go to ground this time. I went to war. Vinny got us into a safe house run by an old Yakuza contact in Queens. Yes, Yakuza. Strange bedfellows, but desperation makes for fast alliances. While Maria worked the comms, I prepped explosives, ammunition, escape routes. I sent the footage to 5 major news outlets anonymously. The murder, the setup, the corruption. Burned the whole thing to the ground. Then I waited. 3 nights later, the door exploded. Masked men, suppressors, military-style movement. Not cops, not mob, contractors. Private hitters, hired by someone rich, scared and cornered. But I wasn't some washed-up thug anymore. I was a survivor with nothing left to lose. And in that moment, I became death. The firefight lasted 6 minutes. 4 dead, 1 wounded. Maria took a bullet to the shoulder. I patched her up while the house burned around us. Sirens in the distance. Cops, real ones this time. I kissed her forehead. "I have to finish this." She gripped my wrist. "You better come back." I nodded, but I didn't believe I would. Carraway was hiding in an old federal safe house outside Montauk. I got there by boat, took out 2 guards on the dock, entered through the basement. He was waiting, gun in hand. Smile still fake. "You could have been one of us," he said. I raised my weapon. I was, until I remembered who I really was. He raised his. We both fired. Only one of us walked out. The boat bled smoke across the bay as I drifted away from Montauk. Behind me, The safe house burned like a lighthouse made of sin. Caraway was dead, his blood still soaked into my shirt. His final words, a smirk and a whisper, "You're too late." I didn't ask what he meant. I just pulled the trigger. Twice, one for Marsha DeWitt, one for me. Not the me that still breathed, but the me that used to believe in redemption. By the time I reached the docks, my hands were shaking. Not from guilt, from emptiness. I was done. But fate wasn't. They came for me 3 days later. Not the feds, not the mob. Both, Joint Task Force. And behind them, Vincent Garty, John Garty's nephew. The last living prince of a shattered empire. He'd stayed hidden all this time. Let others bleed, let others burn. But now, with Caraway gone, with the old network collapsing, he stepped into the light. Not to kill me, to make a deal. "You've done more damage to the family than the feds ever did," he said, his voice smooth as glass. "So I figured, why not let you finish it?" I stared at him, filthy, bruised, exhausted. "You want me to clean your mess?" He smiled. "I want you to erase it. One last job, one final bloodletting, then you disappear for good." I should have shot him on the spot. But then he said 2 words that stopped my heart. "Maria's gone." I grabbed him by the throat. Where? She ran. Before we got there. But someone else found her first. He dropped a photo. Maria, duct-taped eyes, wide. Fear I hadn't seen since the old days. The message scrawled across her chest. "Come alone." The address led me to a slaughterhouse in Red Hook. Of course it did. Concrete, rust, echoes. It was Paulie's favorite kind of place, and sure enough, he was there. Somehow, after all this, Paulie the wolf was still alive. Older, slower, but eyes still hungry for pain. He had Maria tied to a meat hook, bleeding, pale, but alive. "Did you think I'd let you walk away?" he rasped. "You work for Gotti?" I asked. He laughed. "Gotti works for me. Always has." And that was it. The final puzzle piece. It was never Gotti pulling the strings. It was Paulie from the shadows. "Since day one, you sold out the family," I said. "Sold out me. I made us gods," he said. "You just forgot how to enjoy it." I didn't argue. I drew my gun. So did he. The shootout lasted 13 seconds. I counted each one like a heartbeat. Maria screamed. Bullets slammed into steel. One grazed my leg. One hit Paulie in the shoulder. Another shattered the hook holding Maria. She crashed to the ground, unconscious. I tackled Paulie, slammed his head against the concrete. Blood pooled. He gasped. "You'll never be clean," he hissed. And he was right. So I did the only honest thing left. I put the gun to my own head. But Maria's voice cut through the dark. "No," I turned. She was on her knees, bleeding, shaking, but alive. She crawled to me, took my hand, and said something I'll never forget. "We've lost too much to lose each other." We walked out of that place at dawn, hand in hand, covered in blood, haunted, alive. The feds arrived 10 minutes later. Gotti was gone. Paulie's body vanished. The case went cold. Officially, I never existed. Unofficially, I became a story. The ghost that broke the Gambino. We vanished. South America, then Eastern Europe. Then further, new names, new passports, new scars. I grow tomatoes now. Maria paints. Some nights, I wake up sweating, gunshots echoing in my dreams. But when I roll over and feel her beside me, I remember that I survived. Not because I was stronger, but because I was finally willing to stop being a monster. This is the end of the story. Not because the past is gone, but because I finally stopped letting it own me. And if you're reading this, you're either hunting me, or you need to know if the darkness ever ends. It doesn't, but you learn to walk through it, one sin at a time.